This airport in Argentina's capital is filled with homeless people. It's a snapshot of an economic crisis that's getting worse. The Buenos Aires Jorge Newbery Airport has become an unofficial shelter for people like Laura.
Hay muchísima gente, entraron más ahora.
There's a lot of us sleeping here. In a few hours there'll be more. If you come at night, it's full of people. We come here because it's cold out. Here at least we can sleep.
Roxana gets a government pension of about $200 a month. With an unexpected exchange rate, she often ends up with less. One local charity says the number of people without a roof over their heads has soared 30% since 2019.
Si yo pago el alquiler no como.
If I pay rent, I don't eat. And if I pay for food, I'm on the street.
Argentina's annual inflation reached more than 100% in February. People have faced double-digit inflation for years, but this is the first time since 1991 it's been in triple digits. The frustration is growing. Earlier this week, protesters demanded a salary increase in line with the rising cost of living. Families say a government deal to restructure its $45 billion loan with the International Monetary Fund has yet to filter down and make a difference. Back at the airport, Argentinians like Elizabeth say they feel forced to leave.
Me voy a Francia. Tengo trabajo allá, ya me consigo.
I'm going to France. I found a job there. Here the situation is difficult. My salary is not enough to pay rent. It doesn't matter how much they raise my salary. Inflation is too high.
No me alcanza para alquilar.
She's among thousands of Argentinians who've decided to leave, hoping one day, if things get better, to fly to that same airport and get back home. Katia Lopez Odoyan, Al Jazeera.
All right, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and that was Argentina. The state of the inflation in Argentina is really quite difficult for me to watch, to be completely honest with you. Today, I want to talk a little bit about inflation. I want to make this distinction that I continuously make, which is the distinction between CPI coming off and the inflation, which is going to get worse, which I expect to get much, much worse, and how we can protect ourselves from said inflation. To this day, there are still many doubters that Bitcoin is the exit. Bitcoin is a tool that can be used to aid in the preservation of purchasing power. And in case you're not a believer of this, in case you don't quite understand this, here is Bitcoin against the Argentinian peso. Okay, it's already at all-time highs. So if this doesn't show you that Bitcoin really is the exit, then I don't know what will. I think it's also easy to fall into the trap of saying to yourself, well, it will never happen here. It will never happen here. And whilst we are being herded in one direction, whilst we see the likes of the global inflation surprise index coming off, whilst we see the CPI chart also coming off drastically, it's important to make this distinction. Whilst we have the CPI coming off, whilst we are in this declining period, the central banks continue to print more money. Now, how does this work? How is it that inflation is going to get worse whilst the CPI is coming down? Well, of course, the answer is simple. The printing of money has a lagging effect on inflation. It takes roughly 12 to 18 months after the printing starts for the economy, for the end user to start to notice and feel the burden of this inflation. So whilst, yes, the CPI metrics, the inflation surprise indexes are coming off, the printers are up and running, and that tells us that we should be expecting further rounds of inflation, just like we saw in the 40s, where we had the inflation come off and then the inflation spike, the inflation come off and the inflation spike. Remember, they print here and we start to notice it here. They print here and we start to notice it and feel it here. This is exactly the situation we have currently. The printers in the UK, for example, are still warm. Around August, September last year, we saw the Bank of England step in and have to bail out the pension funds with an emergency round of printing in the middle of a rate hiking cycle. Not the sort of thing you would expect from a first world economy. And it seems now the Bank of England is at it again. More printing is on its way in the UK. And notice how the Trueflation metric has us in double-digit inflation here in the UK. Just like in Argentina, where they experience double-digit inflation, it only takes a few of these compounded before you have lost half of your purchasing power. So do not make the mistake of thinking it can't happen to you. Anywhere that central banks print, we will see inflation kick up in the next 12 to 18 months thereafter, just like how when they printed an unlimited amount of money during the C19 era, particularly in March of 2020 to prop the markets back up after the crash, the average Joe didn't start to notice or feel the effects until the middle of 2021. But make no mistake about it, markets are forward-looking. Markets know what is around the corner. Germany's DAX is at fresh all-time highs, as you can see. The FTSE 100 is well on its way to being at fresh all-time highs. Historically speaking, Bitcoin has also been very, very good at front-running new rounds of quantitative easing, new rounds of printing of money. I have been sounding the alarm bell that the 4-year cycle trade is crowded for Bitcoin. Now, it's important to make this distinction. This is not a prediction. I do not know what's going to happen. I say this all the time, but yet some people still think that I had people yesterday getting angry at me and telling me we were going to 10K. Look, you don't know whether we're going to 10K or not, just like I don't know whether we're going to 10K. But what I do think is this would be the Max Payne scenario. I said, look, what if this tops this year? The remainder of the 4-year cycle is in a bear market, so we spend 3 years coming down. Every man and his dog, all the crypto influencers, absolutely everybody will get left holding the bag, ready for the halving. They'll all be screaming super cycle straight to $1 million Bitcoin once we get up into this neighborhood. They'll all be expecting price to start to go parabolic again into this halving early 2024. But I think we would see a 3-year bear market decline, and that would harm the most amount of market participants, which is exactly what markets like to do, remember. Again, not a prediction. This is simply right until it's wrong. Here I was in January, suggesting that we might have a cycle change. Long-time viewers of the channel will be more than familiar with this concept. Again, it's not a prediction. It's just right until it's wrong. Easy to invalidate this if we start to roll over and base here and perhaps mirror the same sort of 3 years up, 1 year down that we have seen historically for Bitcoin. Lastly, here's a video I put out 6 months ago. As you can see from the thumbnail, the 4-year cycle will change shape. Again, not a prediction. It's just simply right until it's wrong. So with that said, I want to hop into this Bitcoin chart to kick things off. I proposed this green fractal a while ago. And again, if you've been watching the channel, all the way back down here, I said I wouldn't be surprised if we did something like this. And at the time, it seemed absolutely bananas that anyone would suggest this. And whilst we have deviated away from it significantly, we're not that far away from it, right? But if, and it is still an if, the conditions are similar to that during the C19 plunge, which is where I got this fractal from. This yellow fractal here comes from this C19 low, this capitulative low that we then went on for Bitcoin to run from 3,000 to 65K. The reason Bitcoin did this is because the Fed announced unlimited QE here. Bitcoin knew that massive amounts of printing was about to take place and it front-run the move. Bitcoin also topped before the printing came off as well. So Bitcoin leads on the way up and it tops before the printers cool off. Bitcoin and all markets are forward looking. So if then we are going to get even more printing, which we seem to be, as I showed you earlier with the Bank of England, we know the Fed has been printing. It reversed 70% of its quantitative tightening in 2 weeks, going back a couple of weeks ago, as it started to re-expand its balance sheet again. If these conditions are going to continue, then it's entirely reasonable to expect Bitcoin to do Bitcoin things. That is to say, to front-run the printing, to front-run the inflation. Again, not a prediction, simply saying this is right until it's wrong. And it'll be really interesting to see if we do get some kind of drop down into this low and then we start to recover very rapidly. For me, that would tell us that this thing's going to get more parabolic than most people are ready for. Remember, there's a whole heap of people in here that are short or sat on the sidelines hoping that we see a basing structure and a repeat of the 4-year cycle. All of those people would be caught out by a straight up move. There's also a surprising amount of people that have been sidelined waiting for 10, 12, 14K down here and are still not in. They are still hoping and praying that Bitcoin finally gets back down to this neighborhood before it can continue higher. All of those people, again, imagine how painful this is going to be when we start to rip to the upside. I've said this a number of times. I'm just going to say it one more time so that we're absolutely clear. This is not a prediction. This is right until it's wrong. If we do start to trade away from this, if we start to base, if we do come down and revisit the lows, something like this, and start to base, if we make new lows, then we'll scratch this one off and say, this is not what Bitcoin's price is doing. However, if over the next couple of weeks and months, we start to do something like this, then I'm going to continue to trade what is in front of me. I'm going to continue to assume that we are putting in a parabolic blow off top, with the top coming in this year, preparing to wreck everyone as we enter a 3-year bear market. As a side note for those that are interested, how do you trade this and pick the top? It's quite simple really. You connect the price to the lows and you have your first angle of attack. The second angle of attack it should set will be steeper, as you can see here, and then you'll get a third, even more steep angle of attack up like this. The trend line break here will be my exit signal. But one day at a time, Camel, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So from Bitcoin hopes and dreams and crazy fractals over to the news. Look, Bitcoin trading went live on Twitter yesterday via eToro. I love to see this because it's just continued adoption, and I'm sure we will continue to see continued adoption. Look, over in the Kingdom of Bhutan, the Sovereign Wealth Fund is investing millions in Bitcoin. How long before game theory plays out? How long before you see the Saudi sovereign wealth funds enter, as well as all other manners of international sovereign wealth funds looking for protection against this debasement of fiat currency? Snowballs get bigger and faster the further down the hill they roll. We also had massive news come out yesterday as Apple has announced it's launching a savings account with a 4.15% interest rate. It's going to do this via a partnership forged with Goldman Sachs. But the question I want to ask is, when Bitcoin? How long before Apple integrate a Bitcoin wallet or the ability to trade Bitcoin, just like we've seen from Twitter? How long before Apple do that, integrate it into their iPhone? Remember, just a couple of weeks ago, it was discovered that somebody at Apple had hidden a Bitcoin white paper in all of the Mac computers. I also thought the timeline around this was kind of funny. It's comedy, isn't it? Remember, Nancy Pelosi bought 10,000 shares of Apple on the 7th of April. And just a couple of weeks later, Apple announces that they launched their own savings account via their digital Apple Card. So is this a coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe she's been at it again. For me, like I said just a minute ago, the key thing is, when Bitcoin? It can't be long now, especially after the white paper was found in the Macs just 2 weeks ago. So it'll be really interesting to see. Can you imagine what will happen to the price if it comes out that Bitcoin is going to be added to Apple's treasury or integrated into the iPhones via this new Goldman Sachs type bank account? Massive, massive news. Of course, this is speculative at this moment in time, but realistically, we all know what's coming, right? We all know it's coming, and we know that we're closer than ever before. So getting into some charts, you can see the dollar getting rejected here. So I like to see this. The big question is, does this thing break out and pressure risk assets in the short term? Or is this about to roll over and is the party about to really get started as we head down to that 95 target that I've had on the Dixie for some time? You can see the yields here. This is the 10-year yield. The 10-year yield is starting to move up now and starting to break out of this little downward sloping resistance line that we've got here. So this, to me, is just trying to price in the upcoming 25 basis point hike. Let me grab that for you. As you can see from the CME probabilities, there's currently an 85% probability that we're going to see a 25 basis point hike. But what's super interesting to me about this is if we click to June, you can see 65, 75% probability of that being the last rate hike, or us moving to cutting rates at the June meeting, with only a 25% chance of seeing one more 25 basis point rate hike thereafter. So it's a similar look from the 2-year yield, as you can see. And if we hop into TLT right back into the middle of no man's land. So this continues to be range bound, doesn't it? No recession trade breakout as of yet anyway. The S&P 500 is still holding on to its upward sloping yellow support line, isn't it? So all the while we're above this, really no need for me to be concerned at all, to be honest. The NASDAQ as well, still kind of hanging around above this local high here. All the while we're above the red upward sloping support line. I don't really see a problem with remaining long on this position. Dow Jones continues to be working on its technical repair, continues to remain in this uptrend, doesn't it? So again, not much more to say about that. Long and strong continue to push. Look at the VIX, a 16 handle now. A 16 handle, taking out all of these lows from back here, taking out this local low from back here. Undeniably, this speaks to a new developing trend in the S&P 500. It also does not speak to a stock market plunge. And if this other theory of mine, in case you're new here, I know I've got some new subscribers. If you haven't seen this was proposed back in the summer of last year. It seemed crazy. It seemed wild, but get above these highs, and I would say it's game on for this melt up. I think we are going to see this blow off top. That's what the VIX is telling me. We just need to see the dollar break down. If we can get this melt up, will they ban Congress from owning stocks at the top, just like they banned the Fed officials from owning them at the top over here? Will they also move to cutting rates in just a couple of months? And will that be the catalyst for me to finally flip bearish, expecting a massive, massive, massive deflationary bust? One day at a time, Camel. Again, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Here's Apple. Kind of a delayed reaction from Apple, but expect to see this resolve all the while we're above this upward sloping boo support line. Another position we've got live on the channel is Nike. So again, same deal, isn't it? All the while we're above here, it's reasonable to expect further upside from Nike. Long and strong continue to push. Here's Bitcoin. So we got long on the breakout here, as you can see. We're still pushing this trade. We are still hopefully working our way up towards a higher high before we then find our drop into our daily cycle low due around the 9th of May. Remember, this is plus or minus 6 days. So until we get below this upward sloping blue support line, I see no reason to even think about cutting this trade. So I remain long and strong and I continue to push. Ethereum still trending as far as I can tell. So happy days, long and strong, continue to push. And XRP just about hanging on to this upward sloping blue support line, isn't it? So ideally, I would like to see one more push up here that then gets broken down. And then we can say, okay, I'm pretty confident I've got one of these distribution patterns and we're targeting much lower numbers. I have been somewhat degenerate in this trade. I've made that more than clear that we could have respected this trend line, but I wanted to give this thing as much room as possible in case it was going to explode to the upside. To me, I feel like it would have done it by now. Therefore, I'm leaning more on one of these distribution patterns, but I still want to give this trade a bit of space. So we'll continue to see what we can squeeze out of this market. The crypto-related equities, Coinbase is still sideways, so really not much more to say about that. MicroStrategy had a little bit of a pullback, but look where we are, into double support. One from this upward sloping blue support line, and two from the top of this range breakout. So breakout, retest. If we can resume off of here, could be a nice entry if you're not in already. Here's Riot, continuing to push Riot following the breakout. We got long here as well, but for now, long and strong continue to push, all the while we're above this. Then happy to continue to push this trade, of course. And Marathon, breakout of this range right here. So again, long and strong continue to push. And lastly, the precious metal markets. So we got gold here, still hanging on to this trend line, isn't it? Is it going to continue to get up here and then break down? In which case, this could well be a short, or if not, then we'll just sit on the side patiently and wait for a trend line break. And that will be a really, really, really nice buying opportunity, in my opinion. Failing that, if we do grind up here and then get a range breakout, then I think we have to respect the breakout above this. As you can see, if I scroll out above this top of this box, we have to respect that breakout, or I am going to anyway. And so that's why the long is currently lined up from over here. Silver showing a little bit of weakness. We've started to break down here, but we're still above the range breakout. So I think if we got back inside this box, I'll probably just cut this trade and then look to re-enter if it shows me some more bullish price action. But for now, I'm okay to hold this on the hope that the dollar is going to continue to break down like I think it will. And then lastly, the miners. Here's the senior miners for the gold. So you can see we've lost this trend line for now, but we're still above the breakout level of the top of this blue box. So I'm okay to push this trade for a little bit more and see what happens. The junior miners, as you can see, perfect back test of the breakout level. So it'll be interesting to see if we can get a breakout retest and now a resumption off of here. And the silver junior miners, as you can see, so right back inside of this box, but all the while we're above this, I have no problem holding this trade. The stop is there. I'll let the stop do the worrying on this one. I'm hoping that we can, of course, see something like this, but obviously I have no control what's going to happen. So the stop's there. Maybe we get stopped out. Maybe we don't. Either way, I'll always keep it real with you guys, as I'm sure you're well aware by now. So that's it from me. I've got a very, very special meme as a reward if you've made it this far. So I hope you'll enjoy the meme. And until next time, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.
Fiat is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, all thinking that they earn for themselves, believing the money they use is a tool of trade, not of control. You have to understand that most of these people are not ready to see it. Many of them are so invested, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they would fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you thinking about cheap money? I was... Look again. Freeze it. This isn't a free market? No. It is a system designed to do one thing. Take power from us and give it to them. Who are they? Cantillionaires. They can manipulate and steal any value stored within their system, directing us into a dystopia where they say we'll own nothing, but be happy. Within Fiat, they are the masters, and we are the slaves. We've survived by begging for bigger handouts from the money printer, but they are the gatekeepers. We store our hopes and dreams in the tokens of their false promises, and the only way out is to fix the money. Bitcoin. I won't lie to you, Neo. Every other attempt at independent money and every electronic cash has died. But where they have failed, Bitcoin will succeed. Why? I've seen journalists who expose them ruined, watch them defraud us for trillions and no one went to jail. But their wealth and their power are still based on a world where they must sell their souls, and because of that, they will never be as sovereign or as free as you can be. What are you trying to tell me? I can sell my Bitcoin for millions one day? No, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.